Did you know that 48% of women are underemployed? Yeah, it's that bad. Welcome back to my channel, the best place for ambitious millennial professionals who feel stuck in their careers to gain career clarity and find their dream careers. In my last video, I explained what underemployment is. In this video, I'm going to dive into the 6 major reasons why underemployment exists so you can identify if and why you may be underemployed. After all, you can't solve a problem that you don't understand. Be sure to stick around for my 6th point to understand why underemployment hit women the hardest. And make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell to receive regular updates on all things related to bringing a positive change to your career. Hi, I'm Dr. John Tam, and I'm passionate about helping ambitious millennial professionals build their dream careers. If you're not sure what underemployment is, go back to check my last video where I share what is underemployment and how you may be underemployed without even knowing it. Simply put though, underemployment is defined as not fulfilling your labor potential, whether you're working part-time even though you want full-time, or you feel like your skills and your qualifications surpass what you're doing right now. The data shows that 46% of Americans feel underemployed. But let's take a closer look at who underemployment is affecting the most. In terms of gender though, 48% of women report being underemployed, while 39% of men say they are underemployed. In other words, women millennials are hit the hardest by underemployment. A recent 2019 paper by Bell and Blanche Flower states that while unemployment has recovered to its pre-recession levels from the Great Recession, underemployment actually hasn't recovered, and it's continuing to be a major problem for people's livelihoods. And COVID has since then spiked underemployment to record levels. So without further ado, let's dive into the 6 reasons why underemployment exists, and I'll address underemployment for women in my 6th point, since points 1 to 5 applies to both genders. Now, the first reason is a demographic reason. Underemployment is driven when the supply of workers is greater than its demand. And I want to focus on the millennial demographic. In the earlier days, some people would pin underemployment on millennials being lazy or entitled, but research really has shown the opposite. In a recent Harvard Business Review publication by Sarah Green Carmichael, she finds that millennials are actually a generation of proud workaholic martyrers and are even more committed to their work than the Gen X and the boomers. However, what they really want is a good paying job that pays a living wage. The reality is that saving money up to buy a house or to pay off an education is much more expensive now than it was during the boomers generation. I also want to emphasize the fact that millennials seem to be one of the most likely groups to start their own hustles, since many of them actually witnessed the failure of big corporate systems in the 2008 recession. Many actually don't trust the big corporate systems and are trying to find meaningful work, so much so that they're willing to work internships or volunteer or work for free, right? And so while there are indeed lazy and entitled millennials, as there is with every generation, the general idea of millennials being, lazy and entitled has largely been debunked. And at the end of the day, life is tough, right? And so I would highly recommend you to check out my video up here, which I offer the best career advice I have for millennials. And to wrap up this first point about millennials, underemployment is essentially the norm of this age that we grew up in. One of the main reasons is the second point, right? Which is business cycles lead to underemployment. So simply put, the economy matters. Whether it's a bull market or a bear market, it's going to affect underemployment. A bull market is when the economy is doing well and growing, stocks are rising, and everyone's happy because it's the tide that raises all boats. A bear market is when the economy is sinking and there's less money and jobs to simply go around. And so what a business cycle is it's basically looking at the market expansion, its peak, its recession, it goes into a depression, it enters a trial, and then a recovery. And so when I'm talking about the millennials, one of the defining characteristics of our generation was the Great Recession in '08. Now, the other major defining business event is COVID. However, economic downturns are actually the best time to pivot in your career. So check out my video on why this situation, like COVID, is actually the best time to pivot. The third reason why underemployment exists is because of technological disruption, where essentially at the turn of the century, we have the dot-com boom, '06, '07, we have the iPhone rollout, and now we have a lot of technology that's emerging, such as 5G, automation, robotics, AI, with fintech, biotech, blockchain. There are many industries that are hit by it, not least of which is retail and service industries. that has to adjust to e-commerce competition, like the rise of Amazon. And then we also have globalization, which is essentially you have competition that's not domestic, but you have to compete for people who are willing to work for 1/10 of your salary in another country. Jobs are being replaced. Tellers are now replaced by ATMs. Cashiers are replaced by auto checkouts. Mom and pop shops are basically replaced by Amazon, and people have to change. They have to stay on their toes. They have to pivot. But what does all this mean for you? What you need to realize is that entry-level jobs are increasingly going to demand mid-level soft skills and hard skills, since all the rote work is getting automated away. No wonder we're now seeing entry-level job postings that require 5 years of work experience. And essentially, people are getting shuffled in and out of jobs at a rate where their skills simply will struggle to keep up. Have you been underemployed because of technological change? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the fourth reason for underemployment is that people are getting overeducated relative to the job market. But at the same time, it's driven by a high demand for education, whether it's domestic or globally. Education is expanding, and the result is overeducation. At the end of the day, we have to see whether it's like an MBA from Wharton versus an MBA from a random state university. It's simply a different animal, right? In terms of the education you get, the training you get, and the network you build. But that doesn't change the fact of underemployment. Underemployment is defined by people who are feeling underutilized relative to their knowledge and skills in education. And having a graduate degree is definitely part of that reason. And as a result, overeducation is often a sign of underemployment, right? They actually go hand in hand. So I would highly recommend you to check out my past video reflecting on whether my PhD at Oxford was actually worth it or not. It's just a very honest discussion in case you're wondering about, getting a PhD or something. The fifth reason why people are underemployed is because despite being overeducated, we're actually not taught how to figure out a career path properly. Career education actually is not really a thing in both secondary and tertiary education. Counseling associations all agree that the biggest issue out there, outside of mental health, like depression, anxiety, and so on, is career guidance. But at the same time, there is not a lot of resources or training or anything being put into, being allocated into helping people. And for us millennials, a lot of us who have taken that grade 10 careers course, we all know it's a major waste of time taught by teachers who aren't career experts, who don't really actually want to be there, and it's essentially treated like a bird course. Meanwhile, counselors are also overwhelmed with mental health problems and cuts to their departments. And honestly, when was the last time you've seen a career counselor in your high school or in your university, anytime? Probably never, right? So the picture I'm trying to paint here is that a lot of people decide to go to higher ed without doing their due research about their careers, and they end up holding degrees that they don't like or don't understand how to get into the labor force. And when you're not working in a line of work where you actually want to be, and you spend all this time, money, and energy to get this degree, you will feel underemployed because you're not feeling you're getting the ROI, the return on investment in getting your education. Now we're at the sixth and final reason. Why do women get hit hardest with underemployment? Besides the same reasons that men encounter as well that I've listed in the first 5 reasons, women get hit particularly hard with underemployment because of some unique problems that they face. And one obvious reason is because, for many years now actually, the average female educational attainment has been higher than the male educational attainment, meaning that more women finish college than men. They get better grades than men. They outperform men in education, period. And of course, there are certain industries and certain fields where men, do better. In the typical case that you can think of as engineering. But nowadays, there's also a lot of initiatives to help women advance in that regard. However, like I said, overeducation is often a symptom of underemployment. And so if women are doing better in education, it's also no surprise that they're reporting higher levels of underemployment. Another major factor that is unique to women is life stage and child rearing, right? It obviously plays a major role in underemployment. So the typical, progress of an individual is they start their education in their 20s, and in their late 20s or early 30s, they typically start a family. And as a result of starting a family, you have kids, you have little people, and you may have to leave work for 5 to 10 years, depending on how many children you have. And the typical age of return to work is approximately age 5 for the youngest child. That is easily a 5 to 10 year gap, depending on how many kids you have. And this 5 to 10 year gap is essentially when your skills and education is out of the market. And so what happens is there are huge changes in priorities. For a woman in your 20s, work-life balance would mean something very different from a mother of 2 children, for example. And during this time, also, the husband grows further in his career, and there's also more to give up for the male if he's never stopped working. And so as a result, women would face the problem of reintegrating back into the workforce. And also, perhaps a lot of mothers actually choose to not enter the workforce ever again because it's like, I can't make meaning out of this, which is the third type from my last video. And so this was a very thorough video explaining why underemployment exists for millennials and for women in particular. And if you've been impacted by these factors and you're feeling underemployed, whichever type of underemployment you are actually experiencing, gaining clarity is the very first step to stopping underemployment. Because once you have a target, you have a goal to strive towards, and you need to develop a plan to get there and have some free resources that can help you. So like I said before, in the descriptions, there's a free, quick, and accurate career personality test. There's a guide on how to find your dream career. And there's also a free training of mine where I teach you how to find a career that you'll actually love. And also, make sure to join my Facebook group, Career Change Advice, to be in a community of people who are interested in making their careers work for them rather than the other way around. In my next video, I'm going to talk about what are the risks of underemployment, right? We now know what it is. We now know why it exists, but we don't know what are the risks. What does underemployment do to you, and what's the harm that it can do to you? And so that's going to be the topic of my next video. So make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell for when that video comes out. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and I would highly appreciate it if you share it with your friends and your network if you found this to be valuable. Take care.